All right, so I'm going to jump right into this without wasting any time whatsoever. Reality is I'm just coming out fresh from an incident response a week and a half ago. I think I can talk about it. It's public knowledge. Canvas, the LMS. And I don't think people truly realize that when the second defacement started making its rounds on socials, a lot of us, instead of overreacting, first step we did was actually try to find out, is this legit? Where were these defacements found? And then realizing that there could be an entire cycle of deepfakes and deepfake identities as well, continuing to push the narrative forward. I think the most interesting conversation I had, and for those of you that are not familiar with what happened with Canvas, apparently, I don't have any confirmations on this, but there are some folks in the room from the education sector. Apparently, the organization went and negotiated. And when I was speaking to one executive about what that negotiation would have looked like, A, you don't know who you're talking to, but second, 2 minutes into that negotiation, the person on the other line might make a comment to the effect of, yeah, it was nice seeing you drop your kids at school today, and the conversation takes another twist completely. So with that context in mind, I am going to say, and it's popped up onto the screen, that my approach for this session is 35 minutes of very hard, intense situational questions. All three panelists have been briefed on these questions, slightly. The biggest challenge is for me to stay on script, but there is a content advisory. And I've put that content advisory up because from the very first question, we will be discussing a very sensitive and triggering form of attack. So if there are any situations that we discuss that might be uncomfortable for you, I'm going to kindly request that feel comfortable to leave the room, and we'll go from there. Panelists, you good to go? Now, for this session to be impactful, the questions will come up onto the screen if I can get things to work, and they do. And yes, I'm going to ask my panelists to talk about it. I'm going to read the questions out verbatim, but I also want to hear from you. And if there's any perspective you want to throw in after any speaker has spoken, go ahead and do it. We have 33 minutes and 13 seconds, and I'm going to make sure we wrap up within that time, also because I have a work call at 2:30. Anyways, question one. Pig butchering operations are now running LLMs that maintain emotional relationships with hundreds of victims at once, adopting tone, escalating manipulation in real time. Vivian, I'm going to start with you. When does the model become the co-conspirator? And along with just reintroducing yourself in a few seconds, what is a pig butchering operation?
Oh, wow. Okay, let me talk fast here. My name's Vivian Soon. I'm a principal architect for cybersecurity at a large national bank where I lead our cybersecurity architecture practice. Pig butchering is the term that's used, and I hate this term so much. It is so loathsome. I hate it with every fiber of my being. That is the term that they use for cyber fraud schemes that have some kind of extortion or exploitation, romance schemes, deals on designer goods, fake tech support, grandparent schemes, and it's called pig butchering because you keep going back and cutting off pieces till there's nothing left, right? That's why it's called that. It's awful. And it is very, very organized. There are fraud gangs all around the world who operate on this. They shop around the list. And if you have a relative or someone you know who's been sucked in to a fake romance scheme, you just go check the headlines. There's a woman in the US somewhere who spent tens of thousands of dollars to who she thought was legitimately Keanu Reeves. She thought she was in an online relationship with Keanu Reeves for almost a year and kept sending money, expecting him to come visit. And it's predatory and it's terrible. And even if you catch somebody that you know who's been sucked into this and you get them to stop, their contact info has already been sold onto a list of high-value contacts that are known to engage. These get shopped around on Telegram and the dark web, And it is the modern face of white-collar fraud, and it is scalable now because of AI. So the question you asked is, at what point does the model become complicit? And that's a really difficult one, because I think it's hard now for us to differentiate between cybercrime and crime that uses cyber. It's all the same, right? Like, 2 years ago, we noticed that ransomware gangs were operating on very stable cycles. It's a product development cycle, right? Sometimes more reliable and more on time than commercial software development, but it's the same thing. The bad guys have industrialized. So this is the problem with general purpose tools. There is nothing in the entirety of human history that was safe by design. Not fire, not the wheel, not the ballpoint pen, not freaking paper. Who's gotten a paper cut in the last week, okay? Nothing we've invented is safe by design, and this is no exception. Technology and software has made this worse, not better. So what we have now are highly scalable, highly adaptive tools that are great at generating specific content and distributing at scale. Are the models complicit? Maybe.
Maybe.
It is still fundamentally criminal activity and is predatory and is loathsome.
Thank you. AV team, if I'm going to ask you, and perhaps this is a little too much to ask, but if you can keep the questions on the screen, because I do want the audience to consistently look at them, and perhaps it piques their interest if they wanted to chime in. AV team, thank you. Emerson, I'll go to you very quickly. Your thoughts?
Sure. I think that it's early stages yet, and it's difficult to really play the blame game when it comes to software, right? It's not a human identity where you could go arrest, but it does become somewhat complicit when you do apply the objective behind it, tell it what to do, tell it what to lie, what to evade, etc. So I think that's where, in some instances, it does come complicit as a co-conspirator, but there isn't any law really ingrained right now that says, okay, application A, you are going to be, or liable for that. You're looking at the actual actor behind it, who is more complicit. That we're going to look at now. Back to pig butchering, that's a $75 billion industry. Last year was $75 billion that got distributed, what have you. In the Philippines, recently the government rated, I think it was 35 buildings operating at scale. So this is not something out of a basement, an actor, a script kiddie. This is a really well-organized modern-day crime.
All right, I'm going to work with that. I do have a couple of questions, but I'll hold on to them. Lambert, if you want to quickly introduce yourself, welcome to the stage. I believe it's your first session here at AI SecCon. Your thoughts on that opening question?
Yeah, so I'm Lambert from the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. I started with the government about almost 20 years ago with the RCMP, working special operations. I moved to CSIS and worked in a similar field there for a number of years. And then I ended up at the Communication Security Establishment, where I saw how deep Pandora's box can go in the IC, and eventually I'd had enough, and I said, it's time to move fields. I moved over to cybersecurity at the Cyber Center just about 3 years ago. So in all that time, I've heard a lot of terms. Pig butchering's kind of the newest term. I hadn't really heard about this recently, but what it brought to mind is, the industrial scale of cyber fraud and scams. So it doesn't really irk me. When I think about it, I think about organized crime and cybercrime always being profitable, and that the onus being on us to learn about these things and constantly challenge the people who want to scam us. And the motivations of threat actors have not changed over the years. So when I see things like a new AI model has come out and cyber actors are going to use that to target the West at scale, it's kind of an evolution of a problem we've seen for many years. And they're targeting our human desire to trust others, our human desire to believe the things that we're seeing and reading. And it's this vulnerability, human vulnerability, that I think needs to be addressed with pig butchering or whatever the term is at the moment. Are the models the co-conspirators? I don't think so. I think not yet. I think in time models may become, may evolve, may morph, and in that case we have to reassess, but at the moment it's going to be, as Emerson said, the human behind the keyboard. The interesting thing about pig butchering is that it's organized crime bringing victims in to run these operations, and they have to do these things to, make ends meet or stay alive. So you can't even really point at them and say you're doing something wrong. They're trying to survive, and it's these gang leaders or ringleaders who run these complicated networks abroad and target us.
I think from my perspective, co-conspirator or not, you really, even if you do decide that they're co-conspirators, who do you charge? Who do you go after? In 2020 at Canadian Women in Cyber, Vivian, you might remember this, on stage, the government of Ontario was on at that time as well. We talked about, and I apologize, another sensitive example, situations in gaming environments where you had cases of avatar rape, right? But it was very clear that you could identify who the users or those groups of users were that were engaging in those activities. With the LLMs, it opens up a complete gray area of discussion, both legal and ethical. Very curious in the crowd. Anybody, any thoughts on this question? Go ahead. Your name, please, wait. Patricia.
My response to that is that today, thank you. Today, I don't think that we can consider the model a co-conspirator because the model is a creation and it doesn't have, by our standards today, you cannot take the model to court. You cannot, you can take the person behind the model, you can take the group behind the model, the creators, the developers. Those are the people that are accountable today for that.
Sure.
As it was mentioned, in the future, as things might evolve, we might have a Skynet, who knows? At that time, might be a different story.
Fair enough. Now, I'll work with that. And in the morning as well, we did mention, I think it was Megan from Microsoft who had mentioned that you'll have to have stricter rules with developers. I think with cases like Grok for government, which has already been deployed, we've seen situations with Anthropic, Palantir being another example as well. There could be a lot of things that come up from it. And I agree with you, from a legal perspective, although I've digested a lot of episodes of Suits, I know shit about the law. So I ain't going to say for sure what's going to happen. Let's go to the next one. Oh, Vivian, I'm sorry. This one has you all over it because it's Vivian Identity Sven. This one is you. A deep fake just passed biometric verification and authorized a 25 million wire transfer. Every security control got beaten by a model that costs $200 to run. What does identity even mean anymore?
It means a lot less than it used to, friend. Not an identity expert, actually, but I have very strong opinions about where we're at with machine identity. I think I'm ultimately a technology optimist, and I think it's great that we have all these tools that are disposable, and I see the potential and the possibility. But to everyone who's looking at rolling out agentic solutions, the first question I have is, where is your registry? Where is the registry? Who's doing attestation? How do you know who the owner is of any of these things? Because if you don't have these fundamentals sorted out, how do you know when the agent's gone rogue? How do you detect a malicious, falsified machine identity? How do you distinguish that from a real person? And these are fundamentals that we've gotten away with not paying a lot of attention to until now. We have to all get to a point where our systems are generating the right signals so that we can identify fraud and misuse and abuse. And then we have to close the governance and the policy gaps and make sure that are the right people who should see those signals seeing those signals? Do they know how to act on it when it happens? And some of those pressure points are not technological, right? A lot of them are people and process and culture and policy and those things not lining up at the edges. It comes back to the fundamentals, like we're spawning off these machine identities. Can we please go back to zero trust? Can we please go back to least privilege? Because in the world that we're looking at now, there are certain things that I can architect for, sure, and there's other things that I can't. I can architect for least privilege. I can architect for conditional access. I can even, and I was waving my arms frantically at CISO Forum talking about this, I can even architect for the future of ephemeral, task-specific agentic identity. Sure, give me that and a spaceship too, right? That I can plan for. I cannot architect for the layers of fraud and deepfake and the never-ending game of whack-a-mole to try and detect that. I cannot architect for the non-deterministic nature of some of these solutions. That has to rely on monitoring and monitoring of the monitoring, but I can't get there operationally if I don't have the fundamentals right, right? So do I really understand the assets? Do I understand the full context of it? Do all of these agentic identities have owners and an attestation process? And then all of my defense in depth, am I collecting and sending the right signals?
Okay.
Can I pivot off of that?
Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll take one comment.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Recently met with the CISO of Anthropic, a group of CISOs, and you hit two of the main topics that he spoke about. First of all, he said, prepare for a world of hurt. A world of hurt is coming over the next 2 years, especially within the OT field, what have you. But zero trust and hardware-based identity were two things that he said to get in front of right now. Zero trust is no longer a buzzword. Make sure your organization is there and prepared to be breached. And back to hardware-based identity, back to this now, you're moving past MFA here. If you said to me that this model has moved past and get to that point, you've moved past MFA, so now it becomes contextual and behavioral analytics at its best to help defend.
Fair enough. Lots to add to that. I'll ask another question. Keep it short, please. Go ahead.
Hello? Yes, sorry. I think the question is wrong. I think the question is,
I love it.
what does identity mean anymore? Identity is always quintessential. What we're worried about is authentication. We now authenticate that face, meaning it's real. That's what we use to authenticate. That eye drop, that fingerprint is authentication. Identity is identity. It's just it's what the person represents. How do you authenticate it? So all the authentication mechanisms we have before, they have to be changed. I used to trust a face. I don't trust it anymore. So now what are we doing about it? These are things we've got to think about. The SMS text that comes in, I used to trust it before. Now I don't. These are things that we got to think about, right? I think that's where we got to be looking at things. What we're talking a lot about, in yourself, is all about fundamentals. Least privilege, zero trust architecture. These are things we should have been doing a long time ago. The only difference that's really happened now is the risk has gone up because the probability of exploit has gone up, right? So the impact was always the same. If that was impacted, you'd lose data, there'd be bad things. But now the probability has gone up. Before I leave zero trust later on, it's hard to get inside, but now it's easier. Yeah. So those are the things we got to worry about. So the fundamentals, and I think it's really authentication we got to worry about, is how are we going to properly authenticate? Where MFA and Face ID and your fingerprints, you never know, they can all be fake.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
great point. It's all about proof at the end of the day. Back to the conversation I had with CISO, you really spoke to proof, identity, the human layer, the human element. So it's really, really big on that. You spoke about agentic AI, talking about workforce identity federation versus moving away from API and API keys. Those things are going to be, subject to change. One last thing that I found was interesting is that you said, nowadays vendors ship products, with vulnerabilities built in. They know that there's vulnerabilities. They wait for a reaction. Said no longer that those days are done. If Microsoft or one of these top vendors ship a product out to a consumer, the next day an exploit is going to happen. It's going to be breached. So that's going to change.
Fair enough. Appreciate that. I see one question there. Just keep it short. We may answer it now, or I may move to the next question, but go ahead.
Sure. So the question is, in a world where deepfake can successfully pass verifications, do you think that organizations should shift from trust by identification to trust by anomaly detection? That's what the question is.
That's the title for a book. Yeah.
I can take a stab at it.
Yeah.
I think we do have to shift to something, trust by something. I'll echo the previous audience members' comments, though. Identity is no longer, recognition. Recognition can be false, and evidence can be falsified. So, especially in relation to deepfakes, identity used to mean trust, and in this time more than any other time, some kind of zero trust model for human verification is absolutely needed, especially when biometrics fail, as we see on the screen, and we will continue to see in the year to come more biometric failures, which will require, as Vivian was saying, something that we can architecture to help, whether it's anomaly detection or some other method, something to help reduce the success of these types of attacks.
Thank you for that question. Very quickly, anybody wants to add anything? Identity is no more I think, therefore I am. I connect, therefore I am doesn't exist. I see a question there. Go ahead, and then we'll move forward. Go ahead.
So as leaders in the security industry, what kind of liability are you guys taking on now?
I'm going to come to that question. I'm just going to go to the next one, but we'll answer that because I think the next question we have on the screen will speak to that. So just to repeat, it's like looking at all of this now, what kind of liabilities are we taking on both personally and professionally? So we'll come to that shortly. Let's go to the next question. Threat actors are fine-tuning open source models on dark web data. Custom GPTs for phishing, social engineering, exploit generation, zero guardrails. We open sourced the weapon. Are we complicit? Vivian, you want to go follow the same cycle?
Define we in this
Yeah,
question.
I
I think this is a very natural consequence of the pursuit of generative AI at scale. I think it's not surprising that this is where we've landed. I think that if it comes down to responsibility, liability, and so on, you have to go to people are going to use good things and do bad stuff with it. It's going to happen all the time, right? Our regulatory frameworks have not kept pace with where we're at. Our legal frameworks have not kept pace with where we're at. We still have a lot of trouble with intellectual property law and technology. Like, that's still problematic, let alone, deep fake scams and the things that you can do with the confluence of stolen data and bad actors with access to large-scale LLMs. I think I have all kinds of thoughts and feelings about where we're at with the AI economy, but I'm going to stop there. I think that this is a natural consequence of the pursuit of generative AI at scale.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that why stifle innovation? If you look at even some of the pre-AI era, you look at Kali Linux or the Linux environment, open source technologies. Those are meant for good and bad as well, and we as defenders have to be prepared. We have to be 100% right all the time. This is just symmetry when it comes to AI and etc. But the threat actor in this case has to be right once. So that's symmetry.
All right, we can work with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would argue the question also, like whether is it open versus closed models? Is that what makes us complicit, the openness and transparency, or is it the release of a new model matched by the release of accountability? We can release new innovative solutions every day, but we also have to release them safely and securely with appropriate mitigation. So I would like a day where ChatGPT 6.6 or whatever the next model is comes with baked-in guardrails that are also up to date, which are also protecting the users every day, protecting the systems, and not just full-on innovation constantly without consideration for the impact that this is going to have.
Yeah, and to be fair, most of these models, like the Anthropics of the world, they are releasing vulnerability detection capabilities for us to use. So it's not like, okay, here's a model, you're on your own. They are implemented. We look at OpenAI, etc. So it's up to us as defenders, our teams, etc., to really delve into that and use it, test it out.
Yeah. I'll tell you what advantage we do have as defenders. The advantage that we do have is specificity, that we know our environment, right? And we have the ability to architect defensively. We have the ability to design for that. We have the ability to introduce complexity where it serves us. And this is hilarious to me, Ali, because like a year or two ago, I don't think anybody said the word architecture on a CyberX main stage. And now this year, like, I'm not the only one. Like, I've heard this like all over the place, and I think that's fantastic. But that is one of the advantages that we have. We can install honeypots, right? We can try to direct the adversaries to places in our network that are full of sensors, right? We can do that. Yeah, it's hard. But as defenders, these are the strategic advantages that we do have, and those are the kinds of things that we do need to look at. So to the point of guardrails, we have to take responsibility for our own guardrails. Every organization that is looking at rolling out LLMs should also be looking at where you can use your own small language models for your own guardrails for the things that you want to control. These are the things that we can do as defenders, and I think we should.
Okay.
And I agree with that. I'm just going to volunteer that we need to not forget about the base system controls, just because AI is the new thing. AI and the controls that come with it are an overlay to the existing system controls. If we have a porous network before, we're going to continue to have a porous network now with all these innovative new solutions coming in. You have to do all the old good things, follow those top 10 IT security actions from the Cyber Center, follow our new advice around how to protect against AI. There's things we can do meaningfully to reduce the attack surface.
Fair
Stop
enough.
with that.
I got 3 questions that came in that were messaged to me directly, and I'm going to take them and weave in the question that we got earlier as well. And if there's anyone in the back that has their hands up, the folks who are running the mics around, we have about 9 minutes, so feel free to just flag me down. We can give them the mic. The 3 questions that I got in, I'll summarize them into one. It's a tough one, and it's a little bit on the edge, or at least I think so. But we hear a lot about, yes, you've got all these centers now, and without pinpointing any one, but lots of think tanks around AI, lots of different this is the ethical and responsible use of AI, this is an ex-AI memorandum, yada, yada, yada. And I'm going to target this at you coming from the federal perspective. Are these bodies, are these notes that are put out, the memorandums for ex-AI, etc., are these of any use, or are these just lip service to just, we had to get something out? Do you see them being practical at all?
I think a lot of the advice is practical, but it costs money to implement, and that's the hesitancy. We see these things and we groan at it, and we say, maybe there's a solution out there that can take care of all of this for us. And so we go and we find some other tool that will do the thing we should be doing ourselves. And it can lead to a supply chain attack where you put full reliance on a single vendor, or you just don't do those things. You don't follow that advice practically. So that's taxpayer dollars at work. Spending millions of dollars on the advice that we come up with. It's not for any use if we don't implement it. So I think there's a use to it. I feel terrible for someone who has to read the 40 pages we put out on certain controls, but in there, baked in, it's much easier to read and implement than to suffer an attack afterwards. So I think there is meaning in there.
Take the 40 pages, put them onto an LLM, make it into
That's
five notes.
Yeah.
I see there was a question there. Amit, was that from you? Yeah, Amit, go ahead. You got the mic? Yep. AV team, you got the mic too?
Got it?
Yep.
So my question is, when offensive AI reaches a point where it can autonomously discover 0 days, mimic trusted identities, bypass biometrics, all sorts of interesting things that humans are capable of doing right now, which AI can do. Is the future of cybersecurity really defending, or are we negotiating which AI model are we, which AI systems are allowed to exist or not? Like, what is the future of cybersecurity per se?
Interesting. And because we have 7 minutes, thank you for that, Amit. I'll also tag that into the next question that we have. Criminals are automating full fraud pipelines, recon, payload, exfil, foster, and while they're at it, ordering their food as well. Then our SOCs can triage one alert. How do defenders match that speed without becoming what we're fighting? I think that tags in perfectly well to the question Amit just asked.
Jump in really quick and say,
Sure.
I keep hearing human in the loop, and I like the term human on the loop because we all have to get on board with using some of these new machine-to-machine speed and velocity matters by becoming more adept at commanding AI ourselves. So I'm not talking about replacing jobs, I'm talking about empowering the people who already work across all these institutions to learn how to operationalize these tools so that when you're triaging millions or billions of malicious attempts, you can orchestrate with your agents how to actually mitigate that. But if we just take a step back and say, well, that's not going to be the job of human, I think we're not going to keep pace. So it's to educate people on how to do these very complex tasks before it escalates further.
Yeah, there's been a common theme through a lot of the sessions today. Like, there's a spectrum between, cognitive offloading to cognitive outsourcing to cognitive surrender. right? And where and how we use those tools determine where on the spectrum you are. Spoiler alert, cognitive surrender is really bad. You don't want to be there, right? And for a lot of what we do in our organizations and in our daily lives, even cognitive outsourcing is problematic to trust to machines. So legitimate and responsible uses of the technology have to fit the right spot on that spectrum. And anything that strays outside those boundaries, that should be outside of your trustworthy AI framework. It should not meet your acceptable use policy. And I don't think we're going to be able to avoid, that model arms race. But from a defensive point of view, the intelligent and judicious application of AI at the right points in that threat detection and response workflow, that will enable the SOC teams. But again, it comes back to the fundamentals, which were the same fundamentals 2-3 years ago. Are you sending the right signals? Are those signals going to the right place? And can I respond rapidly and with the right context?
Fair enough. We'll work with that. Emerson, I see you're agreeing with Vivian, everything she said, but anything else to add?
Yeah, I think it boils down to a point as well. It's a great question, by the way, Amit, on where we're going to be 5 years from now. I think it's both proactive and reactive. Think about it. We didn't have AI about 3 years ago, and now we're reacting to a new evolution in this space. I just want to speak about cyber resilience as well, too, that a lot of us build resilient type networks, programs, etc. But I think what we need to look forward to is building an having an anti-fragile mindset where we're going to be thriving with changes as they happen in our organization. And that's where I believe that we as leaders or defenders, have to position ourselves, not just to be cyber resilient leaders, but to focus on becoming more anti-fragile. There's a book by Nassim Nicholas Taleb that speaks to this. It's titled "Things That Gain from Disorder."
Yeah.
And that is where that concept is coming from. And I think a lot of companies out there need to change that mindset from just being reactive, listening to buzzwords. Yes, the frameworks, the MITRE frameworks, MITRE Atlas framework, WASP Top 10, AI, WASP Top 10, what have you. Those things are well researched, and the community is contributing to that. Thankfully, we have that as defenders, but guess what? The threat actors are reading that as well. So guess what? We got to be a little more.
I'm going to echo really quickly what Chris said in panel 2. We have 90%, we have 100% of the tools that are available right now. We just have to learn how to use them, because on the other side, cybercriminals using the same tools, they're also reading our guidance, the XAI Top 10. They're reading all of these things and seeing, this is my playbook. How am I going to commit my next attack? I'm going to see, are you following all these baseline controls? Are you doing all this? They're following the same guidance that defenders use.
Work with that. Sounds good. We have exactly 3 minutes left, and I'll let the next question weave in as it comes up. But I do agree with you also in terms of books. I think game theory, there's multiple books on game theory, but there's one particular statement in it that talks about second mover's advantage. And that's just not theoretical. It's practical in terms of you're seeing how attackers are weaponizing your LLMs. You do have a second mover's advantage. And this theory is being used to study the current 90-day or 92-day war that we're seeing in between Iran and the US. So, yep, thank you for that. I'll also add that I think you're 100% correct that 3 years or 5 years ago, we were not talking as much about AI security. And I remember on stage, I think it was in 2019, CISO Forum in Niagara Falls, I said something like, yeah, the S in IoT stands for security. And not everybody got it, but you get the point that now it's becoming such a prevailing conversation. So with that, and exactly 2 minutes to go, I'm going to put you down to 30 seconds each and run through this final question. An AI-powered romance scam engineered someone's psychology over months. They didn't fall for the bad email, they fell in love with the machine. Our legal system calls that user negligence. Is that acceptable? Vivian, we'll start with you. 30 seconds.
Absolutely not. What the hell, man?
Fair enough.
What the hell? There's a whole, this is the new face of human slavery. Okay, there are these like industrialized call centers in Asia where people are literally kidnapped from their villages in Burma and in forced servitude running these scams. Like they're held captive and forced to do this. This is freaking human slavery. There's another side to it too that's more voluntary on the cybercrime job market, where lots of people, predominantly young women, are going on telegrams like, hey, I'm available for voice and model work. I'm 20 years old. I speak 4 languages, one of which is Brazilian Portuguese. And this is not for the adult film industry.
Yep.
This is for body double work to create the deep fakes off of.
Yep.
Okay, like this is a huge problem. And again, like this is not user negligence. This is the bad guys industrializing the technology that's available. And if we don't report the fraud, we can't go after the fraud.
I'll take that. Emerson, 15 seconds.
All right, I'll try my best. First of all, I agree with you, but I want to just angle this now back into our network or in our organization. You know, these signals, these psychological cues, etc., are well researched. They have PhDs on board hired to, you know, to advise and script these details for the users. But think about training. What do I've trained our end users to do? Basic stuff, detect a phish, passwords, MFA, what have you. But now you're reaching into the emotional side now.
Yeah.
How do you train someone now to look for these visual cues and or contextually behavioral analytics along the way to say, you know what, no, this doesn't feel right.
I'll carry that point actually for training. Digital literacy in schools, and as we have the next generation growing up, we need to train them not just on social media and the evils of social media, but just how far the deepfake angle goes. You are no longer trusting that person, that image you see on the screen. We have to teach children, the next iPhone generation, not to believe the thing you saw, and not just because of not just because of exploitation. That's the main thing we say. Someone's going to get pictures of you and blackmail you. There's a lot more to it, and specifically around how this can be financial fraud. There can be so many other angles. So digital literacy 2.0.
Yeah, and I think one of the lectures that I plan to give in September in class is on the topic of C2PA and how that can become a marker to identify things. But I think, you know, in 2020, we had the mother of Amanda Todd, Carol Todd, come on stage, and that really brought it all together. So with that, we're exactly at time, but I will jump off what you just said and about the digital literacy side of things. You know, one thing that I often say in my class, and perhaps this doesn't fit here, but I'll say it nonetheless because it's my last session. A student once asked me, you know, is it ethical or legal to do this? And my question was, listen, man, it's not illegal to fart in a crowded elevator, but it sure is unethical. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And one of the things that I've started doing is actually teaching the students the consequences of doing certain things with the LLMs that they're doing and what it can mean, not just for them in the school or in their workplace, but for them as in their status within the country. With that, I will take this moment to thank my panelists and wish you all an enjoyable rest of the conference. Back to our wonderful MC, Rob.